Okay, weeds, don't you just love them? Everywhere you look on the kitchen garden plot, we can see some weeds, and what you want to do is use the most efficient ways of getting rid of them. Best thing to do is to get a nice sunny day, it's nice and dry, and get a good hoe. This is a Dutch hoe that you'll all be familiar with, nice and sharp at the end. And the key to good weeding really is little and often. Don't let them build up. Certainly don't let the weeds go to seed, because then you're just perpetuating the problem and making it worse. So here I am, nice bit of hoeing, and slice those weeds to bits and get in between the rows and get in between the plants. And you can leave all that on the surface. On a nice dry day, the plants will just wither and die. One hoe that I'm particularly fond of is this speed hoe. It's got a pointed end, and it's got two sharp edges at the back. And this is really good for those weeds that are really hard to get up, especially if the ground is dry. So with this one, you can really dig in, and you can pull it back, push it forward, and it really does do an effective job. So you'll get all sorts of weeds coming up in your garden. Some of them actually you can eat, so that's another way of getting rid of them. So for example, dandelions and chickweed. We have a lot of chickweed on the kitchen garden plot. You can actually put into your salads. Chickweed, you'll all come across it in your gardens. It takes about 5 or 6 weeks to regenerate, and it produces about 2,500 seeds. So it really is one that you've got to get rid of, hopefully before it seeds. So again, this has got quite a few growing up in between the rows. So again, use that. Now, things like this are really good for rows. They're not so good for close-up work around plants. We'll talk about that in a minute. The other thing that you can think about doing to suppress weeds, we've got lots of chickweed here, but here we've got a row of potatoes growing, and what I tend to do is put some grass clippings down. And that does help to suppress the weeds to some extent. Not totally, but it does help. And the other thing it does, which is fantastic, is that it keeps the moisture in the soil. And that's what you want, especially with potatoes, is to keep the soil fairly moist and not let them dry out. Another hoe that I'm really fond of and got used to using a lot is this swow hoe. It looks like a golf club. And it really is very clever, because you can get round plants quite close up without damaging them. A bit more difficult with the other two hoes that I've just looked at. So really deft piece of equipment that. And this one is an onion hoe. So you can really get down and get close with this one and just pull them out like that. Of course, when it's really dense, the best thing to do is to get down on your hands and knees, preferably with gloves on, and just pull them out like that. And I don't know about you, but it's very therapeutic. It's a good way of de-stressing, and I feel a great sense of satisfaction after you've actually weeded a plot and it looks nice and clean. But you've got to keep at it. Yeah, talked about using chickweed and dandelions in your salads, and of course on the kitchen garden plot surrounding us we've got plenty of nettles. Nettles, you can make nettle soup, nettle pesto. There was a Tibetan monk thousands of years ago who actually lived on nettles, and rumour has it that he turned green, but I wouldn't recommend that. The other thing about weeds in your garden is that they are good for pollinators, so they do attract insects, so it's not all bad, and they can actually tell you something about the quality of your soil. So if you have a lot of clover coming up in your soil, it probably suggests that there isn't enough nitrogen in your soil, and if you get a lot of dandelions, it's probably suggesting that your soil is acidic. So some beneficial uses of weeds, but overall it is a battle, and you've got to keep on top of them and keep your plot nice and clean.